Denial was most definitely the first stage because it's that moment of you can't believe they're gone. I mean, her body was there, but the essence of who she wasn't. And like I said before, you don't want to leave them. That was one of the hardest things, was having to walk away and know that I wasn't going to see her anymore. I just remember the walk to the car when I was leaving the hospital. I had like a bag of her things. It just didn't feel real. Like it can't be happening. Part of me kept thinking, well, I'll just, I'll go home, I'll sleep, and then I'll be able to go back tomorrow and see her. Because it had been a month of us being in and out of the hospital with her to see her. And it's just, you don't want to believe that that's not the case. And then there is a moment where you realize, I have to take care of where she's going to be next. I sat thinking, I honestly didn't know what I was going to do. Now, my mom did have a living trust that she had set up, and we had talked about things along the way. So I knew she didn't want to be buried, that she wanted to be cremated. So I knew those wishes, but I had no idea who I was going to call or who I was going to set anything up with. My mom didn't have someone that was, her regular pastor or minister or any religious official that she talked to. So it immediately became really overwhelming. And the nice thing at the hospital was the palliative care team did come in and they did hand me a folder that had information in it that was very helpful. And I remember one of the forms that was in there was a list of mortuaries and places that would have services if needed, and places that would do cremation with, roughly what the prices would be and the phone numbers. So I was sitting in the hospital with her the last couple of days, and I had that folder, and I really, really didn't want to open it up because as soon as I opened up that folder and picked up my phone and started to make phone calls, it's like it made it official. And I was still a bit in the denial phase that she was dying. But if I didn't, when she did pass, I just didn't want her sitting around in the hospital. So I started making phone calls probably the day or day and a half before she actually passed away, and got some information. I found a lovely company out here called the Alpha Society, and they were beyond amazing and caring and compassionate and empathetic, and they were just like, just let us know, and we'll get everything set up for your mother. Because she had passed on a Saturday, and most places are generally closed, they did have a wonderful gentleman who was on call. And when I called to say that she had passed, he said, well, then we're going to come over and pick her up, and we'll bring her back here and get her ready for her cremation. That was the one phone call that, hanging up from, I just started bawling. Because, that's it. And you never want to sit and think about that. And I know many people whose relatives have things set up. Now, my grandmother, she was emphatic, I'm going to be buried. And she didn't want anyone to mess up her arrangements. So my grandmother went with my mother and myself many years before she had passed. And she went to the mortuary. She decided on the service she wanted. She made the payment. She picked out her casket, everything. I just remember it was this pale blue casket. And I was like, Grandma, are you sure that's the one you want? She goes, yes. She goes, I'm going to be dead and I want to be buried in the casket I want to be in. I was like, okay. To me, it just looked like a 1950s classic car. But if that's what she wanted, there's no reason she shouldn't have what she wanted. So my grandmother had everything set up. But now my mom was passing and there was nothing set up ahead of time. But the beautiful women at the Alpha Society really helped basically get what's the initial ball rolling when you know your loved one is going to die. So once I had that call settled and knew that they were going to be the ones that were going to come and get her, then it was just a matter of thinking of what else would she want. Because even though she had the living trust, and there is a section in a living trust for you to put, you know, your final wishes and what would happen if you were in the hospital and incapacitated. Basically, your medical directive is in there for everything you want. But my mom didn't think that far ahead. And actually, her setting up a living trust came really close to before she was passing away. My mom originally had a will, and she made sure I knew where her will was. I knew where all her information was about bank accounts, insurance that she had, who I needed to call, cancellations I needed to make. But when I was setting up things for my family and to make sure my son was going to be fine, I did a trust. Because then you can assign an executor and someone that will execute, whether it's divvying up property or anything within bank accounts, making sure everything's taken care of that needs to be after the fact. And I had suggested to my mom that she should go and get a living trust. So that way we would have an executor to look over everything and not have to go through probate, which with probate, when you have a will, you generally go back to a lawyer who then goes and starts filing everything. In a lot of states, property gets held up in probate, and it takes a long time for anything that your loved one has to be distributed among the family. And so I had tried to tell my mom it wasn't because of anything else she had aside from the house. I didn't want to sit for years with a house in probate on a different coast. For me, I just wanted to know I could take care of things and get things done and not be waiting on a third party. Because frankly, what your loved one has is theirs. You're the family member. You're the one taking care of it. You should be able to access it easy. So my mom had a lawyer in Virginia, and she was going to go get her will updated. And I said, Mom, you should really look into getting a living trust. And she went to the lawyer, and the lawyer talked her out of it. Because he's like, oh, you only have your daughter and your grandson. That's not going to be a big deal. No problem. Let's just set up a will. Now, a will is cheaper and takes a lot less time for them to put together. And the amount of time they'd have to spend doing a trust, sometimes I guess people are just lazy. But he had talked my mom into the will. I was extremely upset after the fact when I started looking into what that would mean. And like I said, it goes back to the lawyer and then it has to go through probate and things have to get filed. So it ends up coming out ahead a little bit for the lawyer. So even though a living trust is more expensive initially. Honestly, when you get to the point where your loved one has passed, being able to save time and just take care of what you need to and take care of the business once your loved one has passed, it's actually worth it. Because if you calculate how long you wait and paying a lawyer to go into probate and just the headache and what your time is worth, putting a little bit more into having a living trust is worth the money. So before my mom had gotten sick, we had talked about it, and she was going to go ahead and set up her living trust just so everything would be easier. And it was in the process, it was getting set up. And when my mom started getting sick, we had notary coming, we had our dates, we were going to be signing the documents, and she went into the hospital. So it was a roller coaster ride of, before the hospice care, having a notary who was the most amazing woman. Her name was Pat. She had been to the house a couple of times, but when my mom had gotten sick, she came to the hospital and helped us get everything set up there. But it was very fast to try and get it done before my mom went into hospice care, where she would be basically under sedation. Unfortunately, she didn't have time to map out what she wanted to do. So as far as her wishes post passing, I just knew that she wanted to be cremated. She wanted part of her ashes taken back to Virginia and placed in one of her favorite places back there. Now, I would say what the favorite place is, but frankly, I don't want to get busted because technically you're probably not supposed to leave them there. Kind of how you're not really supposed to dump ashes into the ocean, but you kind of know people do it. So she was like, you can have half my ashes in California, take half my ashes back to Virginia. That was all I knew. So I had to basically get two different urns, one that would be going to Virginia and one that would stay here. And the other thing, if your loved one is going to be cremated, is you make sure that they give you travel certificates if you do need to go to a different state. And the one thing was, my mom was in my carry-on. There was no way I was putting her in checked on luggage. You do not want to do that in case anything happens. And you just need to give yourself more time when you go to the airport, because they will check. And they definitely were checking with my mom's remains. They asked if there was something she wanted to be dressed in for her to be cremated in. And that became, in and of itself, a really complicated thing to do. Because I'm in her room, I'm going through her clothes. She had so many really beautiful things, but a lot of things that she had never worn. And I knew my mom. And she would want to be in her favorite sweatshirt, comfy pants, and feel like she was sitting watching TV or playing her puzzle game on her iPad, which she loved to do. So setting that out and realizing that this is the outfit she'll be cremated in was really difficult. When I took it in and I'd taken all the items, I'd taken her sweatshirt, comfy pants, her favorite slippers, a Scottish Terrier stuffed animal she had because that was her favorite dog, and a letter I had written to her and a letter my son had written, and then photos of all of us that loved her. So Sarah said she had placed everything in there, and she said, your mom looked really cozy and really comfortable and like she was happy. So I knew I picked the right outfit. This is love, death, grief, and everything in between. Hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell to stay up to date on all new videos. Until next time, lean into your grief and accept the tears whenever they decide to come. But above all else, embrace the love and the laughter and the memories that you're going to find along the way.